All right, it is 2 past the hour. We're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to another Green Energy series. In this Green Energy series, where we talk about high performance windows. So, before we dive into the topic of today, let's give you a little bit of background to Solar Oregon as an organization if you're not familiar with Solar Oregon. Solar Oregon is a nonprofit that was founded in 1979 that puts us at 47 years old this year. It grew from grassroots efforts to support clean and renewable energy. We continue uh, this mission today by being a bold voice and trusted educational resource to empower all individuals and communities statewide to adopt solar energy. We offer many webinars and events throughout the year, including many offerings of the 101 slide deck, which is a solar plus storage uh, uh, slide deck, and we give that either both in webinar format and in person throughout the year. The in-person presentations of that slide deck are presented throughout the state of Oregon. And we also deep dive into many specific topics through various ways, such as through the Green Energy series. We also organize tours of homes and farms that have installed solar. In the spring, we do a solar winery tour where we tour um, farms that have installed solar panels, and many farmers have in Oregon have discovered that plants actually grow quite well, if not better, in partial shade conditions. Um, and recently, I've been reading about how electric fields uh, are can be used as herbicide and pesticides to reduce the use of chemical pesticides and herbicides. And so, having solar panels on the farm can actually be the electricity source for this electric field way of managing pests and weeds. So, very interesting things that are happening in the world of farming as we add solar panels onto the farm. And then we also have a Go Zero home tour. A few years ago, my home ADU tiny house project was on the Go Zero tour. You can still find that video of uh, my home on the tour on YouTube. So if you search like Solar Oregon Go Zero tour Edward Louie or something like that, you're gonna find that video if you want to see that. And then we also do solarized campaigns where we help canvass neighborhoods and connect uh, homes in that neighborhood to solar contractors that are participating in the Solarize campaign. And by getting multiple homes in a neighborhood to go solar at the same time, everyone is able to get bulk discounts on solar panels and inverters and reduce the overall system installation cost. A win-win for everyone. If you like the work that we're doing, feel free to support us with this link. We have two hardworking staff, and everyone, including myself, is a volunteer for Solar Oregon. Feel free to use the chat and the Q&A to ask questions. So a little bit about me. My name is Edward Louie. During my day job, I work as a building energy efficiency research engineer at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. PNNL is one of 17 national laboratories that are mostly supported by the U.S. Department of Energy. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I post quite frequently on LinkedIn about various energy efficiency topics. And I continue to uh, do finishing work on my off-grid zero energy tiny house that you might see a video of on YouTube if you search Solar Oregon Go Zero Tour Edward Louie. So, a little disclaimer, the views in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the position of Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, U.S. Department of Energy, or Solar Oregon. Best efforts have been made to convey facts and information accurately. However, you're encouraged to do your own research and calculations before making investments. So the overview for today's presentation is that we're going to talk about why European windows are so high performance. We're going to talk about how window thermal performance is super important to the overall thermal capability of the wall in general. So this concept of whole wall average thermal performance or whole wall R value and how windows affect that. And then we're going to talk about some specifics about what makes a window high performance. We're going to talk about how the performance of windows are measured. Turns out that North America has a different test standard than the rest of the world. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of getting windows from Europe. And then we're going to talk about um, finding an importer if you are going to get windows from Europe, and then also finding an installer that has the skills to install high performance windows. We're going to talk about cost and then end with some conclusions. So, why are European windows so high performance? Well, a lot of it has to do with energy codes and standards. So, uh, coming out of World War II, Poland is a country that has been supplying building materials to neighboring countries. And one of the industries that they stood up is the window industry, because if you're going to supply cement and tile and other building materials, you're going to also produce windows as well. And the Polish government, since then, has been promoting and the window industry. And so through decades and decades of continuous investments in the manufacturing side and also on the code side, um, nowadays the worst window you can buy in Poland for your home is a high performance window. You can see in this chart looking at the code uh, minimum window that you can buy by different countries, and Poland is the very top. You have to buy a very high performance window versus the United States. We're kind of in the middle of the pack, and not too long ago, the United States, if you are following the latest building code, was at a point 3, and we recently, only in the recent residential code, bumped it to a point 27. So not too long ago, we were even further down the list. Um, and through this many decades of investing by Poland into the window manufacturing industry, Poland has 2,000 window manufacturers and more than 50,000 companies distributing windows. So it's a major industry over there, and it's one of their largest exports out of Poland. So that is why when we're talking about windows coming out of Europe, we're mostly talking about windows coming out of Poland. And high performance windows is really important to overall human comfort in buildings because there's a lot of thermodynamic physics going on uh, between humans and windows. So, human comfort is a product of three factors: radiation, convection, and conduction. So, um, when we unless you touch the window with your hand, the conduction factor is not significant, but the radiation and convection factors are very significant. So the human skin is quite warm, and so it's radiating heat to a cooler air environment, but we're also radiating to the surfaces that are in the room. And generally, the windows are in the wintertime, the coldest surface in the room. And so that's kind of illustrated by that second image there with the opaque wall being like one lightning bolt, but the window being three lightning bolts worth of radiation. And so if your body is radiating that much heat into through the window because the window's a cold surface, you will feel that as a chill. So that affects window comfort. Another thing that affects comfort around windows is that convection. So mo most of us have had some experience with a cold breeze or a cold draft coming from a window, and many times people assume that, well, that cold breeze must be because the window is leaky. I have old crappy windows, so it's probably the leaky window. That may or may not be true. More than often than not is that the reason why the breeze is happening is because the surface of the window is really cold and it's cooling the air in the room, and colder air is denser, so then it falls, and that creates a convective loop, and you're feeling that draft as the convective loop. So, um, if you have high performance windows, then the inside surface doesn't get as cold, and so this convective loop is much less, and so you'll feel that as a increase in comfort. So windows, no matter how good they are, maybe in the future there will be, a cost-effective window technology that makes Windows as good as the opaque wall in thermal performance. But currently, we're not quite there yet. We have Windows that are high performance, but even very high performance Windows are nowhere near as good as an opaque wall in terms of thermal performance. But high performance Windows can be significantly better than a code minimum window in terms of its thermal performance and then how it affects the overall wall average thermal performance. So here we have some scenarios where if the windows make up 15% of the surface area of your wall, and then the rest of the 85% is opaque wall, we can do some simple math, which is what's called area weighted R value or area weighted U value calculations. And so if you have a window of a 0.33 U factor or an R3, which is pretty close to what the minimum window efficiency is until recently, and only recently did we get to a 0.27, which is really not much better. Um, so that will get you a U factor of 0.33. And then if your R value of your wall is 21, then the U value is just the reciprocal of that. So then you get a opaque wall U value of 0.047. And if you just do the average of that, you get the whole wall U value average, and then you can then convert that using the reciprocal to get back to R value average. And it doesn't matter if you have an R21 wall in terms of your opaque envelope. If you have code minimum windows, that minimum code window will drag the whole wall R value down to just 11, which is really bad. I mean, it's approximately 50% off. But if you were to get better windows in most US manufacturers would be like getting close to a 0.20 window. That's in the US is considered a high performance window. And by using a 0.20 window, that'll then make your whole wall average a little bit better. I mean, you're gonna get a whole wall R value average of 14.2. But I mean, many windows coming out of Europe can achieve a 0.13 or 0.14 U value. And then with those much better windows, then you can get a whole wall R value of almost 17. So that's much better than a R11 wall. So this is and it comes with the effects, the improvements in the previous slide of, when you have a higher insulating window, then the draft that you feel from the convective loop is way less. The cooling comfort issues or the heating comfort issues from radiation is much less. So many benefits to having uh, your whole wall R value be, uniformly good if as much as possible. And so that those higher performance that specs we're seeing, a 0.13 window, a 0.14 window, how is that achieved? One is the window has much better seals. That makes it so that even on a windy day, the windows are still high performance. Um, Typical windows in the US have seals that are barely seals because in the US we have many windows that have an operation style that doesn't allow high performance seals to be installed. It's just not possible because we have hung windows that are single hung, double hung, and sliders. And these windows, the only way to actually have them operate is by having the seals not be very tight. And so they use what's called brush piles, weather stripping seals, which are shown in the lower uh, right-hand photos. And these seals can only seal so good. And then the typical casement type window or awning or hopper style window can have what's called like bulb seals or compression seals, but typical US casement or awning or hopper style windows only have one seal. Compare that to a window from Europe. They typically have two to three compression seals, and they have multiple locks that are throughout the perimeter of the window, so that those locks will cam and pull the window closed, so that these compression seals are squished and really solidly sealing. So the windows, in order to be able to support the higher weight of a really thick triple pane uh, insulated glass unit, the frames have to be much stronger in order to handle the weight of the heavy glass. But the heavier duty frames to be able to support the heavy glass also has some additional benefits. So, and then also that we mentioned the locks that are used to pull the window tightly closed so that the seals work. Well, those multiple locks that pull the seals closed also have some security benefits too, in addition to working well with the seals. Um, and so many windows coming out of Europe have a what's called a resistance class, which is a classification for measuring how burglar resistant a window is. And part of the reason why that, this resistance class exists in Europe is because in order to get remodeling loans or home loans, many lenders require you to have windows with at least a minimum resistance class of two, if not better, to qualify for loans. And I mean, it's a logical concept, right? If you're a bank giving somebody a bunch of money for a loan, you want to increase the chances that, you're gonna get your money back. And if some burglar breaks into your house and steals all your stuff, maybe you're not gonna be able to pay back your loans. Um, so that's another interesting benefit to the high performance frames and the high performance glass that's coming out of European windows. And I mentioned Poland windows being one of their biggest exporters. They are not only a biggest the product export out of Poland, but in compared to the rest of Europe, they really do dominate uh, other countries, neighboring countries in the window production. As you can see, they they beat other countries by quite a bit, and they export millions of windows to other markets. So here's some additional information about high performance windows. So many people think of high performance window as a triple pane window. Yes, a triple pane window is high performance, but there's more to it than just throwing three pieces of glass into the insulated glass unit and calling it good. So, you want to think about, okay, well, how clear is this glass? And what's interesting is that in Europe, they tend to have much higher visible light transmittance in the glass. And the reason why they can get higher VLTs is the purity of the sand that is used to make the glass. So it's the sand that is sourced to make the glass in Europe comes from low iron sand, and then that results in low iron glass. And iron in glass makes it have a greenish tint. And so if you ever see a piece of glass and you look at it at a certain angle and you see a greenish tint, it's the iron in that glass. So having a low iron glass gets you higher clarity, and then you get more light coming through and a brighter interior. So that's good. Um, by having triple pane, you can have more surfaces to on the of glass to apply low E coatings, and so then that gives you more options on how to distribute the low E coating, um, so that you're not trying to load up one surface with a very heavy low E coating, and that has some benefits as well. So um, a triple pane, putting low E coating on surface 2 and surface 5 is a generally a very energy efficient way and low E configuration. And the reason for that is because surface 2, putting low E coating on surface 2 keeps the outside heats out. So when the sun is shining on the window, your that surface 2 low E coating is reflecting most of the thermal radiation and keeping it from going through the window. And then a low E coating on surface 5 allows the the thermal radiation that is coming off of the skin of your face and body to stay inside the house so that you're not feeling the cold and the heat from inside the house is not escaping. So that those are the two kind of logical places to put low E coating. And then in between the panes of glass, filling it with a heavy inert gas like argon, helps reduce the conductive losses and convective losses in the window. And then the spacers are also really important. So these spacers that separate keep the panes of glass separated at a specific distance. So traditionally, in the old days, spacers were made out of metal, and everybody knows metal is a good thermal conductor. So modern spacers are made out of um, non-metals, so like plastics and foams. And so that makes it so that you could have the edge of the glass also be high performance, not just the center of glass. In some older windows, you'll probably notice that, okay, the center of the glass is pretty good. You're not able to see fog and condensation through the middle of the glass, but then as you get to the very edge of the glass, you see condensation and possibly some fogging in the perimeter. And that has to do with that edge seal being made out of stainless steel or aluminum, uh, and therefore being a good conductor in the winter time. And then we already talked about seals being really important to the performance. And then th the frames is perhaps the most important thing. So out of Europe, everybody and their dog knows how to make high performance insulated triple pane glass units. Where the real innovation is between one brand to the other in Europe is how good the frames are. So how thermally broken are the frames, and the thickness of the frame, the height of the profile. So basically, like when you have you can see in this picture, the window frame is pretty thick. There are frames that are thinner. They cost more money in order to design a high thermally uh, performance frame that is also low profile. So different manufacturers make different profile frames, and they're all trying to, beat each other on how thermally broken their frames are. Um, but they also, despite being thermally broken, they need to be heavy duty and be able to handle the weight of the big and thick triple pane glass that they put in. Um, Tilt term operation is another factor that makes a window high performance because it allows you to be able to tilt the window in, so for ventilation, but at the same time, when it's open in the tilt operation, then it could be suddenly raining outside and water will not necessarily get into your house because what raindrops hit the glass will roll back outside. And then also the window can be locked in the tilt open position. So the gap is small enough you can't really uh, from the outside be able to get inside. So you get security still while having the window open, which is a really unique feature that you typically don't find in US windows. And then again, there's many options for higher resistance class for burglar resistance. And when you get to higher burglar resistance classes like an RC3 or an RC4, t they use laminated glass so that uh, you can hit the glass many times, and the plastic film between the laminated panes of glass will hold all the shards together and make it really hard to break in. Okay, so some people say that the high performance specifications that European Windows claim are not really comparable to the lower specification Windows in the US. And the reason is because the US has a different test standard than Europe for Windows. So in the US, our Windows are tested with an outside temperature of 0 Fahrenheit and an indoor temperature of 70 Fahrenheit. But in Europe, their windows are tested at 32 Fahrenheit outside and 68 degrees inside. So the claim is, well, our specs look worse because we test to a much greater delta T, so our windows look worse on the spec because we're testing them to more extreme temperatures. Okay, well, that may be true if you're comparing a European test standard to a US test standard. But the reason why it's only half true is because there are many windows coming out of Europe that have paid the money to NFRC to have the windows tested to NFRC standards. So if you then look at a European window that has a high performance spec that is NFRC rated, then now you are comparing apples to apples when it comes to the window performance. And many windows coming out of Europe that are tested to NFRC conditions still really dominate and produce extremely good U values and performance specs. Um, Another kind of interesting thing about the US test standard is how many parts of the US experiences weather condition for many hours a day where it's 0 Fahrenheit outside. Well, it's actually not that common. So like 90% of all US cities uh, don't experience 0 Fahrenheit weather. So um, the thermal performance of a window at 32 Fahrenheit is much more common. And so and there's and the reason why that's important is because a window that is has a glass unit that's optimized for 0 Fahrenheit is not necessarily the same configuration that's optimized at 32. And it has to do with the gap distance between the panes of glass. So like in this photo here, you see that there's a pretty sizable gap between the panes of glass. As you shrink that gap, then you can actually get some slightly better performance at 0 Fahrenheit because when you have a larger gap, you can get a convective loop going on inside in between those panes of glass, even though it's filled with like an argon type gas. So at 0 Fahrenheit, you get slightly better performance by having smaller gaps, but then at 32, that smaller gap is works against you because then you have more conductive losses. So at 32 Fahrenheit, you want bigger gaps filled with inert gas, um, which is 32 is kind of more of the Pacific Northwest type weather. We are 32 or warmer most of the days. So it's better for us to buy windows that have the typical European bigger gap in between the panes of glass. Okay, so and so then the story of oh well, not all windows coming out of Europe have been NFRC tested. So which ones are? There's quite a few of them. So the ones that I know that make a short list are the Salamander Blue Evolution 82, Aluplast Ideal Neo, Aluplast Ideal 4000, and Igloo windows. These are just off the top of my head, but this short list of the some of the largest manufacturers of windows in Europe Um, if you look on their website, you're going to find window profiles that are NFRC certified. So the list is probably much longer than the four that I mentioned. And this list is looking at manufacturers that make windows out of different materials. So outside of this list, you may find manufacturers that only make aluminum profiles or make only wood clad profiles. Um, if you look on these manufacturers, you're going to find, your whatever material you want to choose from. They'll have a profile. And the other thing that's interesting in Europe is that when you look at all the different manufacturers, we can go back to this one, like this Echo manufacturer, they make windows that are Aluplast. But then Drutex also makes windows out of Aluplast. And Daco also makes windows um, that are the same brand as another company that also makes a Aluproof brand profile. So what's going on here? It has to do with that the the Aluplast, the Aluprof, all these different companies, they make the design and the profiles, which are the frame profiles, and then many different window manufacturers can take the design and the profiles and use it to make the completed window. It's kind of like how like Coca-Cola might have the formula and the brand and copyrights on all the marketing for the soft drink, but then there's many bottling plants that are throughout the country and the world that are not necessarily Coca-Cola owned and operated by Coca-Cola, but those bottling plants will take the syrup and from Coca-Cola and actually make the bottled soft drink. So same thing here, where you have about two handfuls of brands, and then thousands of manufacturers in Poland and Europe that make the windows itself using the engineering specs and the profiles. And the story is that because thousands of different manufacturers are, making windows out of the same kind of feedstock of parts and materials, the resulting window may not be the same quality. So it behooves you to kind of research the actual manufacturer. And I will say that like the short list here of manufacturers, these are manufacturers that are some of the largest in Poland, and so they didn't get that big by being making bad windows. So, and then by being large, they also have economies of scale. So, if you choose one of these, perhaps you're going to get a better price than if you choose a smaller brand manufacturer. Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the pros of importing windows from Europe. We haven't talked much about the cons. Um, but there are some. There's always some cons to everything. And so one is really long wait times. We're talking easily 90 days uh, to get a window package from Poland. So um, it's not something that you just get out of bed one day and then think, oh, wow, I want windows. Okay. And you call up somebody, and then like a week or two later, you have a contractor installing those windows in your house. Uh, it requires a lot more planning than that. So you have to deal with the long production and shipping times. Usually in retrofit conditions, this is not a big deal because you have windows that are protecting your house still. In new construction, it can get a lot more annoying because, sometimes your production schedule of your project is held up by delays in the window. Um, Another thing is that even in retrofit conditions, the installer for the windows needs to be prepared for how heavy the windows are compared to the typical window they're used to working with in the US. They are significantly more heavy, And so that means they need, the equipment to be able to handle the heavier windows, like heavy duty glass suction cups and more manpower. And if you happen to have larger windows in like second story locations, um, likely your contractor will need to, rent some hydraulic, equipment to be able to lift those windows and get physical access to that window opening with heavy duty hydraulic equipment. So that's more logistics and it will add some costs on the install side. Um, as I said, typically in order to handle the higher performance glass that's heavier, they then result in thicker frames. And then also in order to get the high thermal performance on the frame, they have to be thicker in order to be more insulating. But all this translates to thicker frames. And so then the actual view out of the window, the amount of glass area tends to be smaller coming from a European window than a US window. Um, and that's some people that's a problem. For other people, that's not a problem. You just have to, see in your home situation whether that will be a problem or not. But one thing that could be a problem is a concept called net-free opening, and that where that comes into play is egress and for fire egress. And so bedrooms need to have an egress compliant window. And if your current window is quite small already and therefore like just barely making the egress requirement, once you order a window that has a thicker frame, the net-free opening might become smaller to the point that you cannot meet the net-free opening necessary for egress. So, that's something to keep in mind if you have a situation like that. Um, and then many European windows come without nail fins, or they're called flanges windows. And so the waterproofing and flashing details are different for a flangeless window compared to a flanged window. And flangeless windows are typically trickier to flash, especially for American installers who generally don't work with flangeless windows. And so you need to find an installer that has experience with installing flangeless windows and working with those trickier flashing details. And as a result of all this, there's fewer installers willing to install Windows that are coming out of Europe because they're Windows that they're not familiar with. And the other thing that's major is that oftentimes, if you're going to get Windows from Europe, the installer doesn't have that relationship with the supply chain. And many US window installers will partner with a certain brand to supply the windows for their company. And by having this brand loyalty and relationship, they get deep, deep discounts on Windows. And by if they're installing Windows they didn't supply from this brand that they have a loyalty relationship with, then there's the cost that uh, of their labor has to be higher because, before what they're doing is they're making up some of um, they're able to give you a competitive labor because they're able to get the windows so cheap. So that's something to keep in mind. We've talked a lot about Windows. Typically, many people, when they're replacing Windows, will also look at their sliding glass door if their home has one and think about, oh, well, maybe I should replace the sliding glass door at the same time as the Windows. Okay, well, there's some very innovative things coming out of Europe with sliding glass doors too. One is typically an American sliding glass door, you will not have, 10 locking points on your sliding glass door. In fact, most American sliding glass doors have like one locking point, and it's so easy to like unlock from the outside that it's sort of security theater um, on that sliding glass door. So European sliding glass doors have, significantly more locking points, again, in order to get those compression seals to work. Um, and there's two interesting kind of technologies to choose from. One is what's called Smart Slide, and so it's a sliding glass door that only when you close it does it pull the operable sash inward, in and out. So when you unlock it, it actually then loosens the operable sash so that it comes out of the frame just a titch, um, and to let you be able to operate. And then when you close it, it sucks it in just a titch to be able to compress the seals. So you get really good air tightness with such operation. But then there's also another more expensive operation style called lift and slide. And so how this works is that if you have the operable sash and say it's really, really heavy because it's a big operable sash that's really wide, lift and slide is an operation where when you turn the operation to get it to operate, the the bottom part of the um, hardware will actually lift the operable sash up a little bit so that it's now not sliding on the actual bottom frame. Instead, it's then lifted up so then it's sliding on ball bearings. And so then you can move a really wide operable sash with just your pinky. Um, but it is more expensive to have that lift and slide capability. And so typically, if you have like your typical 6 foot wide um, type sliding door, it's probably not cost effective to do a lift and slide. You may be okay doing just a smart slide, but if you have a 10-foot wide sliding glass door, or even a 14 or larger foot sliding glass door, then the smart slide um, may not be an option, and you will have to move to a lift and slide. Now, notice I did not mention multi-slide. So some homes have, a sliding glass door that's wide enough that it's made out of like three sections, and then it's called a multi-slide. Um, Europe also offers multi-slides, but I don't really recommend them, and I think many reputable window importers will also not recommend them. Another thing that's available in Europe that's also not recommend is tilt and slides. So tilt and slide is that window operation just like this that you can tilt. So even though it's a sliding glass door, you can ventilate by tilting it in, but then you can then change the operation to a slide also. Um, the videos on YouTube look really cool when they're showing off the tilt and slide operation, but the tilt and slide, the hardware has to be just not as robust because they're trying to fit the tilting capability, and the operable sash is super super heavy on a sliding glass door, so um, it's not like a regular sized window, so the tilt hardware may not be able to handle um, years and years of tilting and sliding and without failure. So that's why it's perhaps not a good idea. So so we've talked a lot about the windows, and one of the ways to and the one of the kind of key crux of Windows from Europe, high performance Windows from Europe, is like how do you actually import them? And most people like you and I are probably not experts at importing and all the logistics and legal documents that come with importing um, Windows or any product from a different country. Well, there are companies that have become experts at importing products from other countries, and there are companies who are experts at importing specifically Windows from Poland because um, it's such a like I said, Poland ships out like 12 million Windows a year, so there's got to be logistics export experts in the supply chain. So there are many of those companies. In fact, like just Poland alone has like 50,000 of those companies. Here in the U.S., there's far fewer window importers type companies, but like if you Google like import Windows from Poland or import Windows from Europe, the first page of Google, you're going to find two companies that routinely hit the first page of Google. One is European Architectural Supply. Um, EAS, and then the other one is Debesto. Um, the issue with these uh, two companies that come out of the first page of Google is that they're not in Oregon and they're not in Portland. They're not anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. One European architectural supply is out in the Midwest, and then Debesto is out of the East Coast with a small office in the East Coast, and then they mostly just operate out of Poland using the power of the internet and video conferencing to do their business. Um, the problem with, having a importer that is that far away is that they're not able to provide the on-site window installation contractor with on-site support. And if anything goes wrong, then they can't really provide that much on-site support. So that could be a major deal breaker, um, especially if, as a homeowner, you're interested in having a smooth process and not taking too much risk in um, the whole window replacement project. So one company that's local to Oregon and local to the greater Portland area is Pivot Windows, run by Andy or Andrew. There's his contact. And so this is just one that I know of. There may be others in the greater kind of Oregon, Washington area that I'm not aware of. Maybe someone in the chat or Q&A can provide an additional one uh, that they know of. So that's one element. And then another element is that most of the companies that are involved with importing the windows from Europe are not in the business of installing the windows. So, and I've already mentioned that like the most installers in the US will not install windows they didn't supply themselves. And then even if they're willing to install windows they didn't supply with themselves, the ones that the window installers in the US are not always familiar with the waterproofing and flashing details of European windows. And so then now what's it called? The pool of ele qualified installers is getting smaller and smaller. So that's another challenge. Um, the one thing that is good is that most importers they know at least one or two installers in like the area that you're getting interested in getting them installed. So like in Portland, most importers will know someone in Portland who can install the windows. If you live in Bend, Oregon, they will probably know some installer in Bend, Oregon who has the skills to install these windows. But that list is not very long, and that list is not one you can find on the first page of Google generally, and it's not one that you can find on the first page of Yelp or the Yellow Page. So it's you have to kind of ask your importer and then also ask around. Um, Here in the greater Portland area, I know of one guy, Shashruda, who runs a company called Shrewdco, and he has lots of experience installing European windows, and he's willing to install windows he didn't supply himself. Um, so that's one option, but like if you know of others, you can put in the Q&A or the chat because my list is not very long. Okay, so everybody also is, of course, interested in the cost. Um, so the latest dollar numbers that I've gotten from Pivot Window, for example, is that they have a ballpark of $50 to $60 per square foot for windows. And that includes the cost of importing them, all the import tariffs, the shipping cost, the local delivery cost, basically everything except the labor cost to install the windows is in that $50 to $60 per square foot number. Um, I personally worked with a company to import uh, the windows and a sliding glass door in 2020. And here's a screenshot of the price that I got from 2020. Um, in 2020 dollars, my windows were about $45 per square foot. Um, And then the sliding glass door was significantly more at $7,500, per square foot. In fact, the sliding glass door alone costs more than all the windows in the whole project combined. I ended up paying just slightly over $5,000 when everything is said and done because this quote doesn't include some of the additional options I wanted. Like I wanted laminated glass on certain windows, and I wanted what's it called? Keys and locking, and also like bug screens on certain windows. And so that added a few $100s to that to come out to a total of just over $5,000. Um, so this is kind of what you're looking at in terms of the window cost. But is that a high price? Not really, because like, let's look at that first row right here, this W6. This window, that's 32 wide and 26 tall inches, $258. Okay, so this is 2020 dollar figures. Let's inflate this to 2026 dollars. Let's say that, it's maybe like $350 and not $250. Well, a run-of-the-mill cheap window from like your big box store is for roughly that same size is already 280. So if that window is like a super high performance window from Poland is 350, like it's really not that much more. So that's one of the key points to take home is that a high performance window from Europe costs the same or less than a mid-tier window from the US. And that's a really important kind of concluding bullet point to kind of keep in your mind. So things that will, if cost is, really an issue, some things you can do to reduce cost. One is you really think about what windows you need in your home that need to be operable, because having the operability adds a, not non-trivial amount of cost to a window. And then if you have a bank of two or three windows that are like right next to each other, have your window installer explore the framing of the house to see if those windows can be combined into one bigger window, because the it costs a lot of money to just make a window, and the tool up cost to make the cut the frame and make the window. So if you can have one window, then it saves a lot of frame cost and a lot of labor at the factory. So those savings translates to lower cost window. But of course, you don't want to get if that bank of windows is if you add them all up together, it results in a humongous window, then the price again goes back up. So, and the reason is because you start needing really expensive and specialized equipment to install it, like because it's so heavy. So, you don't want to get too big to the point that, um, two or three, strong people can't lift it, that you start needing very specialized equipment. Um, and on a sliding glass door situation, you also want to think about what threshold height is acceptable, um, because the smart sliding glass doors tend to have a threshold that protrudes from the floor. It's not flush to the floor, and most sliding glass doors from the US also protrudes, but because we have flimsy frames here in the US, the protrusion is less. And so, are you willing to have a sliding glass door that has a slightly higher threshold compared to the US sliding glass doors? Now, if you want to have a flush opening that has no threshold, then you want then a lift and slide, because that lift and slide allows that operable sash to then, when you close it, to sit flush against the floor, and then when you lift it up and to operate, then it'll lift up and then be able to roll on ball bearings. But then again, you're paying a fairly high cost premium for this lift and slide operation. So that's something to think about. And then bug screens don't always typically don't come with a window, so you have to order and pay a few dollars extra for the bug screen. So when you're ordering windows, definitely don't assume that every window comes with a bug screen, because they generally don't. And then also if the window frame is thicker, how will the window blinds or window shades work with this thicker window in your home? You need to think about that. And if you think about it enough, you may come to the conclusion that like the window blinds that you already have at home may not fit because you have the thickness of the frame plus the thickness of that handle there to be able to operate the European window may end up with a total thickness that makes it not feasible to continue to use your existing blinds. So it may be the most cost-effective option is to actually order blinds to come with the windows from Europe so that they're shipped together. Because many European window manufacturers also offer blinds as an option, and they make blinds that are pretty neat in that it fits very nicely with the window so that it looks very seamless together. So this might be the option you choose to do to what's it called? Replace the window and replace all the blinds in the house in one go. And it may be going this option is cheaper than ordering the windows from Europe and then going online to then like buy blinds separately. Um, so the cost figures I mentioned before about whatever 50 is $60 per square foot now. The cost includes shipping. What I want to do in this slide is give you some perspective that like if you lived in Poland, the window price you can get if you lived in Poland is significantly less than the cost of the windows in the US because shipping and import taxes is a non-trivial amount of the cost. And then, of course, most importer, seller, dealers, they also need to make a profit. And then if they're going to be coming to your site to support your installer, they need to cover that cost as well. So that's how you get arrive at that $50 per square foot, but realistically, the manufacturer in Poland, they're only getting $19 per square foot out of that $50 per square foot. And then the installation labor is kind of a pretty significant part of the overall cost of a window also because you're paying for uh, some skilled labor and that skilled labor is not super available. You know, like I said, the number of installers willing to install these windows is a small subset of window installers. And so I think ballpark wise, if you start to think $90 per square foot, that's a probably a pretty good ballpark number to work off of. And then when you measure the windows in your house, you'll get a total sum up this dollar per square foot. That's kind of the budget you need to think about to get high performance windows to replace your existing windows. Um, and so yeah, the I don't want you to think that this is a super cheap retrofit for your house, but at the same time, I think, you call up any other local window installer, you might not be too much lower than $90 per square foot either. So, the concept of window replacement being cheap maybe just doesn't exist at all, no matter where you get your windows from. Okay, let's see conclusions. So, like, let's recap some of the things we've covered. So, European windows are high performance. A lot of that is driven because a country like Poland, the worst window you can get is a high performance window, and improving the weakest thermal element in a wall, which is the windows, improves the whole wall's thermal performance by a lot. So, that's very good. And the benefits to a high performance window is way more than just energy efficiency. You get the ventilation benefits with and the ventilation being usable even when it's raining, so that's good. Um, the the seals will have some major improvements to sound transmission. So you live in a kind of a noisy street, then the replacing the windows will result in pretty significant sound reduction. Burglary resistance is a major benefit, and as well as long-term durability. So particularly of the seals. So like the slider and the hung wint style windows, those brush seals, they don't really work that well on day one. So then in after a few years of operating that window, they're going to work way worse versus compression seals in European windows. Uh, Even after many years of operating that window, those seals will still seal very good. Um, and then, so therefore, European windows together offer, in whole, superior energy and non-energy benefits compared to many US windows, while costing the same as a middle of the road US window. But some of the things you need to really kind of hone in on and think about is finding that window installer who's experienced with installing European windows and willing to do it. Can be quite challenging, but if you can overcome that challenge, and you're able to work with a importer, a seller, dealer that can give you good support, and also give your installer good support. I think that is the winning team that's necessary to get something like this to successfully take off. And I also want to do a plug for the next Green Energy series, which is on March 7th at 10 a.m. Mark your calendar. This is Pacific time for people who are joining outside of Pacific time. And we're going to have a guest speaker, Angela. She is the executive director of Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association, OSEA. And she's going to be talking about what's happening in this current Oregon legislative session in the topic of solar. So I'm really excited to hear what Angela has to say. She's right in the neck deep in the Oregon legislative sessions proceedings. And I will stop sharing my screen and check out Q&A and the chat. Let's see. We have some questions. Let's see if we can get them answered. Do any US or local manufacturers make European type windows like Milgard? Maybe it's being answered right now. Okay. Um, Many manufacturers, US manufacturers, make casement style windows or hopper or awning style windows. Um, Not that very few make the tilt turn window operation style. Um, you will get some US manufacturers that will buy window hardware and profiles from Europe and to make a tilt turn window. Those are typically very small manufacturers in the US, and due to the um, small production compared to the production volume in Poland and also the higher US labor, these manufacturers tend to make quite expensive windows that um, you and I may not be able to afford. Okay. What about shipping and potential damage to the insulated glass unit? There is a potential for that shipping damage. Typically, most importers that do this that are in this business have worked with the manufacturer to package the windows in a way that the chance of shipping damage is very small. This is not your project is not their first rodeo. They do this every day. They ship millions and millions of windows every year. So I think that's mostly solved. If you have to, um, if a damage does occur, then if you work with a good importer, what they'll do is um, order a replacement IGU and have that one ship in the next shipping container that's coming to the US, and then so therefore in like 2 or 3 weeks, or you will have a replacement IGU for your project. And the reason why it's 2 or 3 weeks is because you still have the shipping, even if the um, and of course, if you need it faster, they can always airship an IGU depending on how big that IGU is. Okay, how are the tariffs impacting these Windows cost and shipping? Um, I'm not super familiar with how much the tariffs are impacting. Um, I just know like the latest dollar figure I was able to get is in the 50 to $60 per square foot range. And then I purchased Windows myself in 2020. And then if I think about just natural inflation, then I'm right at 50 to $60 per square foot. So um, I don't know, but it seems like the price is still fairly reasonable today. Okay, is every window tested? Some US companies that they do this. Um, I'm not 100% sure what this question is asking at. Do you mean like is every window NFRC tested? No. What they do is they test this a sample window that's a specific size to meet the test criterias, and then when they test that window and it passes NFRC and it has the specs, then that window design is then NFRC certified, and then all the derivatives coming out of that design will be NFRC certified also. So, meaning the ones that you and I order are going to be NFRC certified as well. If your question is like, do they test the windows to make sure like that when they fill with argon, that the argon is indeed inside the window once after they fill it? Um, Yes, there's a way to test those quality control things in the factory, and reputable window manufacturers have automated testing. So they have a robot that has a certain sensor to be able to test those things on every window before it leaves the factory. Are there advantages to some of the different frame materials offered? Yes. So UPVC windows are fairly low maintenance. Wood frame windows are higher maintenance, but some people think they're much more beautiful. So, that is a certainly an aesthetic choice you can make yourself. Um, and then thermally broken aluminum tends to be quite durable, but the best thermally broken aluminum uh, still cannot match the thermal performance of a vinyl or UPVC window. So you might pay some thermal performance penalty with going with aluminum, but you might get some improved durability there. Um, Certainly above a certain size, if you have a humongous windows, I will not uh, advise going with a UPVC frame because you need the additional strength of the aluminum for humongous windows. But I think most people with modest budgets don't have such a humongous window in their homes, so all frame materials are on the table for as a choice for most people. Okay, other question. Why do you not recommend multi-slider for wider openings? Because the there's air leakage in multi-slides. So that smart slide feature that I was showing you of the perimeter locks, you can't get that kind of sucking in locking option in a multi-slide. So then what you're left with is the traditional um, sliding up. So the multi-slides coming out of Europe are still better than the multi-slides in the US because the ones in the US are sealed with brush seals. And in my opinion, that's literally just like sealed with hopes and dreams. But the multi-slides in Europe have a kind of a locking action where the pieces of the glass come together, and then there's this kind of like um coupling that makes it so that it's reasonably well sealed, but it's still nowhere near anywhere close as well sealed as a single pane multi-slide or a lift and slide. So it's the seal issue uh, that's why I don't recommend the multi-slide. And additionally, when you have poor air sealing in a high performance glass assembly, you might find that in those particular locations at the seal, you'll have moisture condensation issues. And I've seen examples of that from presentations coming out of Vancouver, BC. Vancouver, BC has some very expensive homes that went with multi-slides, and then they ended up with moisture issues. So, um, cautionary tales. Does your tiny home project have Polish windows? Yes, it does. The window package that I showed you a screenshot of, those windows went into that tiny house project. Um, when you close the last window or close the sliding glass door, it sounds like you've just closed the bank vault door. It's kind of interesting much the sound difference when the last thing gets closed. Um, please briefly answer question in print. I'm not sure what that one's about. Um, that last question, if you have a question and you want me to answer it in written format, you can find me on LinkedIn, and ask me that question. I'll write you a LinkedIn reply. All right, well, that's it. Hope to see you guys on the next one, next Green Energy series. We have that guest speaker from OSEA, Angela. I'm really excited to hear what she has to say, and hope that you guys get the opportunity to learn from her as well. And with that, we're going to close out this Green Energy series and hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, everybody. Okay, bye-bye.